Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and so happy to have you here today. We are going to talk today about taxes. Don't run away. We're not going to talk about how to do your taxes or any specifics about that. We're actually going to talk to you about what happens if you have tax problems, if you have, situations with the IRS or in that realm that you need help with. Little on how to avoid that, but we have a great guest today who does tax relief work with people, and I'm going to introduce you to her. And there are a lot of things to know about this, and if also don't run away if you haven't had this problem, because it's good to know how to avoid some of these things as well. So I'm going to tell you what I read this morning, which was according to the most recent data from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, Americans owed over $114 billion in back taxes, penalties, and interest in 2020. And so some of the reasons that they have in there are life events. People get busy. People have problems like they, lose someone in their life or something around tax time and they don't file their taxes. They get busy. They get overwhelmed. They don't understand taxes. They don't understand what to do. Or they think they don't have the money to pay, and so they just are kind of in avoidance mode. All of this we could get deep into your money relationship when we're talking about taxes. And so I'm going to bring our guest on, though, because she's going to really give us some great insight into how to be on top of this and how to deal with it if you have some problems. It's surprising how many people I talk to who will, as a side comment later in a conversation, mention that they have some tax returns that were never filed, or, they have some things to do in that department. So I'm going to bring on Kedra Flowers, who is a serial entrepreneur committed to contributing positive energy and guidance to the world by leaving a positive imprint on everyone she touches. Through her firm, Kedra Flowers CPA PC, established in 1996, Kedra has provided professional guidance as a CPA and power of attorney for taxpayers dealing with IRS issues. With continued growth, her corporate structure has changed, but her commitment to cultivating relationships and guiding clients to freedom and peace of mind has not. As a TSBPA continuing education sponsor and founder of Dreams Fulfilled Coaching, Kedra Flowers has crafted her own unique delivery of tax seminars, coaching, and professional training programs that provide leading-edge strategies to other peers and professionals. She's been featured regularly as a tax subject matter expert on NBC5 News DFW and has contributed content to minority-owned legacy newspaper publications, including the North Dallas Gazette and the Dallas Examiner. In her private time, Kedra most enjoys quiet time with family and traveling. Her work from anywhere lifestyle has led her to find new favorite pastimes that incorporate her traveling, including real estate arbitrage and Airbnb vacation rentals. Okay, welcome, Kedra. Kind of dying to hear about.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Michelle?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being here. And I love that you're both a tax expert and like a life coach. I think that is so cool and so helpful to people, because people are probably coming to you in a pretty deep state of stress and worry and concern. And so I think that's just a great combination and very, very rare. So I can't wait to get started and talk to you. Do you want to give us a little background, just how you got to this place?
Yeah. So, of course, many years ago, I've been doing taxes for many years and actually owned a full service CPA firm. And one of my, most dear clients many years ago came to me and he said, every time my phone rings, I go into stress mode. And he is a commercial realtor and he knows that's going to be some dollar signs coming down the path. And that was just simply not the effect I wanted to have on people. And that made me really look at, I always did, do the CPA work, the financial reporting and the taxes, but that made me think, let's look at taxes a little bit of a different way. Let's kind of reframe how we look at that to help taxpayers get a little bit more comfortable with what they're doing throughout the year, so that when we get to the end of the year and it's time to have that conversation, it isn't quite as painful. And so that's kind of what led me into the tax optimization lane, but also with regard to tax relief, which I actually initially did that as part of my master's. I served with a low-income tax clinic where I represented taxpayers under audit. And I knew then that that was the love, because I really care to touch people's lives and to improve people's lives. And that's for business owners and individuals. So that's kind of how my journey came together.
Nice. Yeah, very interesting. And so tax optimization is about what? How would you define it?
Yeah, that's great. Tax optimization is actually setting yourself up in business or in your personal life so that you pay the minimum legal liability for which you owe, which is what we are all responsible for. Right? We're not responsible to pay a dime more or a dime less than what we owe based on the tax law, the current tax law. So that's tax optimization. Okay. And there's many different outcomes based on how you plan, how you structure your business, how you structure your investments, and all of that, as I'm sure you know as well, Michelle.
Yeah, that's great. And, this show, we talk a lot about your relationship with money, and there are, if you look at it as a quadrant, there are some very key pieces that go into building financial success or financial independence, and taxes are certainly one of them. And, we don't sometimes we just feel like that's some obligation we have, but it doesn't factor so much into our overall financial picture. And I guess I just want to use this moment to remind people that that is a huge part of it, and how you manage taxes, optimize, taxes, and just your knowledge about it can really help you to be more successful and more financially independent. So.
Absolutely. And, the first thing I say to people that come in the door when they have tax issues, or they've just stopped filing, because oftentimes what happens is they have 1 year where, their business did really well. There's a huge liability, or the business did really bad and there's a huge liability, and they just simply can't handle it. And then they stop filing and they kind of go underground. Mm-hmm. And so by the time they come to me, usually the issue has grown, and oftentimes the IRS has already inserted themselves into, that individual's life or that business's bank account, right? And so when they come in the door, the first thing that I say is, I am here to get between you and the IRS so that you can open it up all to me, no judgment. And then I explain to them that oftentimes taxes are a reflection of different behaviors that show up in other areas of life. So we continue to move away from things that are painful or that create fear for us. And sometimes most of the time, that actually exacerbates the situation. And so what I do is I get on their team and help them to move forward so that really we can come up with a strategy, not only to fix or stop the bleeding, stop the levy, stop the lien, whatever we've got to do there, but also to kind of change the relationship and bridge that relationship with them and taxes. Depending on whether it's a business or an individual, the conversation's slightly different. But the reality is, and this is the bottom line I end up getting to, is that when there is a balance due on your tax return, so let's say, I don't know, you've made $300,000 and you didn't pay estimated taxes. Either you didn't know, or you thought it was an optional thing, which you'd be surprised how many people do. And they get to the end of the year and there's this huge balance and they're upset and they feel like the IRS is taking their money. And one of the first things I explain is, living in America, this is an obligation that we have. And so if I told you today that I would give you give you $300,000 in exchange for $30,000, would you take that deal? Most people would. And so taxes is kind of like that. Another example I use is getting on the tollway. We can ride the highways for free, but you can pay a couple of dollars every few, miles and get there faster on the tollway. It's just, but if you want to ride the tollway, you have to pay those fees. Right. And that's just kind of the cost of doing business. And we want to optimize it. And I suggest hiring a professional, partnering with professionals like the two of us to help with that and making good decisions with regard to your business and your money.
Yeah, I love so much of what you said. I love, the planning in advance. I had one experience with a huge tax bill that was unexpected. I didn't see it coming. I didn't have the money. And from that point on, I never let it get that far again. I have regular tax planning meetings, so I know where I stand. I know because I just don't want that. That was a bad surprise. And so, you can easily know what's happening along the way and plan for it. You just have to, want to do that. But gosh, there was so much there. I think I love the fact that you're using the data to understand some other stories about what's going on, because money does tell a story and your taxes tell a story. And so the situation you find yourself in is actually really, it's great information. It's education. Yes. You can learn from that and you can change your behavior and change the way you do things. And I'm sure you find a lot of interesting mindsets and beliefs out there about taxes. Everybody's got opinions and ideas and beliefs around them. So I love the idea that you actually get into that versus just numbers.
Absolutely. I consider it critical that people change and reframe the way they look at it as if someone's taking something from them, and really shift that to it's a cost of doing business. Now, over time, if you haven't done the things that you need to do according to the rules, and like I said, estimated payments and so forth, it can become a really ugly situation. So, they're not all just that simple. But I will say that the revenue code has provided relief for people who deserve that relief and who qualify for that relief. And so those are the people, in addition to regular tax planning clients, but those are the people that we really try to focus on stepping in, helping them to interrupt that process, stop the bleeding, get back on track, get some reasonable settlement. And oftentimes, a settlement may look like just eliminating penalties and interest that have accumulated to where they equal the amount of taxes that you owe. And then sometimes the settlements are much nicer and much greater than that, in the sense that, the company's gone, there's no income in, I was in a workshop this weekend, and it was really interesting. I shared what I did with someone who was in line, and he said, "Oh, so you're just helping people run away from taxes, Wow. And I thought, that, when people say that, because there are people those people are there. Those are clients that we don't take on if you don't qualify. So what my favorite saying is, I said I wouldn't curse on here, so I won't, but we don't make S up. We don't do that. So if you don't qualify, you simply don't qualify. We can help you get on an installment agreement. But in addition to that, we do get interesting people. And if the thing is, you have tons of money and you just don't believe in the tax code and the Internal Revenue Code, and can you help me get it? I'm sorry, I won't even accept that person as a client. My business and my licensure is based on that tax code, right? Yeah. So, yeah. But we will take advantage of the provisions that are there to help people. And one of the things I did to help reframe that for this person, which it actually did, is I said, well, and I totally get that. I said, but what about that widow whose husband died? They lost their, and this was a real case. The business closed. He had just bought a plane with their cash reserves and, all of this stuff. And then he passes away and he has all these loans and all this secured debt. All that money gets taken and she's left with a 6-figure tax bill. And her entire income is disability.
Wow.
So what about that? So there are I have stories to go on and on, but it's not just a one, and nothing is one way, but it just isn't a one scenario that we help. There's just all kinds of stories, and it really is about people. And it's about, being there to support them.
Right. Oh, I love that. And just, letting people know that there can be relief. You can make settlement agreements. People probably don't know that. I think a lot of people would just think it's very cut and dry.
Right.
But so you obviously know how to do that in a way that the average person is not going to understand how to do. And how did you come to that? Part of it was the work you did early on, but how else do you keep up on? I mean, are you working with the IRS in some way, or how do you understand the ways to do this?
So of course I have continuing education, so we have to have that. We have to stay up. But really, where I start from, and this has been really important in the recent years with the pandemic, where I start from is the Internal Revenue Manual. And that is the guide that the Internal Revenue Service uses to determine how they're going to play the game. And so I developed and designed a course called the IRS Playbook. And that is what that was based on. It was training other CPAs, EAs, attorneys, and tax professionals how to assist taxpayers based on the rules that the IRS plays by. So that internal revenue manual is really that guide, and they update it frequently. Whenever there's different rulings or different procedures that apply, it's updated. And there are very specific financial considerations that go into play. And so the way that I explain it to taxpayers when they come in the door is this is not an individual's decision. There's not someone sitting at the table that's the settlement master that gets to say yay or nay. That's just not how this works. This is part of procedure that has been designed and legislated and put in place so that people who qualify for settlement or relief can get that. And settlement doesn't always mean that you're going to settle for $100 when you owe $100,000, right? Now it can happen. You can settle for pretty low. I think the lowest one I've ever done was $75. Wow. So there can be situations where there can be some small ones, but these are people who landscaping, fell into disability, no insurance, no home, no, you know what I'm saying? And so over years, not paying estimated taxes, you're building a balance, it's growing, but you really there's nothing to get, there's nothing. And so we go in and we negotiate there. And in those cases, there's another option, which is called currently non-collectible. And that's not my preferred resolution, but a lot of many taxpayers who get help from their tax professional or tax preparer or contact the IRS directly, and they're in that position, get placed into a status of currently non-collectible, which means they don't make any payments and the balance just sits there and continues to grow. And then in 10 years, that balance rolls away. But, one of the things that I like to point out to taxpayers is if you find yourself in that type of financial position, you definitely want to take a look, because if the IRS is willing to sit your case to the side, not collect on it, not move forward on levy action against your wages or whatever. It is because you are protected in order to be able to pay your basic living expenses. And that protection is the same thing that oftentimes makes it available for you to get an offer of settlement. And so
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, what I'm taking away too is you just are somewhat eliminating or at least diminishing the fear around this whole thing. Like, I mean, they are people. I mean,
Absolutely.
There is a process by which you can work through this and see if you can come up with something better than what you might be worried about, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think a lot of the things we fear, obviously, we just kind of run away from and avoid. And this is a very good case of something that you need to stop avoiding, because avoiding just makes the whole problem bigger. And really, really interesting. And it is a part of all of our lives. It's something we all have in common. It's something we share. So I think it's very interesting to look at it differently and to change your mindset around it. Let's talk for a minute about the quarterly payments, because you're obviously running into the situation where people don't know they have to make them. And you want to just talk for a minute about how that, what the requirements are, but also what happens if you don't.
Right. So we actually operate, our tax system is based on pay as you go, which means as you earn money, you are required to pay in. Now, if you are an employee and you receive a W-2, then your employer handles that for you. So you're only receiving your net pay each period because your taxes are being withheld and forwarded to the IRS if that's done appropriately by your employer. And whether it is or not, you're still covered. But in situations where you are a business owner, you're self-employed, or you do things on the side, it is important that you get with a professional or take some time to go, everything's on YouTube. The IRS actually has a site on irs.gov, and I believe it's /videos. I may be saying, but if you look up IRS videos, they have an extensive library with detailed videos on exactly how to compute your estimated taxes and all of that. And there are many, of course, you can use your tax software. You can go in and do your full computation. And if you're a business, you should have a CPA or a professional who's doing that for you. Right. But sometimes for smaller businesses, it's as simple as looking at how much your taxes were the prior year. And if your revenue in the current year is pretty much in alignment with that, divide that by 4 and make those your quarterly estimated payments. The biggest thing is just that you're paying throughout the year so that at the end of the year, you don't end up with that balloon payment and you don't have that matching balloon in your bank account. That's the key.
Yeah, very interesting. I think some things are just counterintuitive. We recently set up a company, but there haven't been any transactions that have gone through there. It's not active yet. But you have to still file a tax return for it. There are some things that people might just assume, well, I haven't used that, so I wouldn't have to file. And, there are a lot of assumptions out there that might lead people to do something that would result in penalties or fines or whatever. Any others that you know of that are just obvious, but people assume that they don't have to worry about it?
I think a really common one I hear is, well, we didn't make any money. We only had losses those years. You're still required to file. And if you have a partnership or an S corporation where K1s are distributed, even if you had a loss in that year and if you did not file, you're going to be accumulating penalties for failure to file. Unlike the individual tax return, where if you have a refund and you don't file, there's no associated penalty. So that's very different. And I think the group of people that have the most difficulty with that and who suffer the most as a result of just lack of knowledge are sole proprietors. And I expect that over the next year to 2 years, that's probably going to be, and we're going to get an influx of those people who just simply didn't know, because a lot of entrepreneurs or people who have been working jobs for many years decided, I'm going to retire. It's the pandemic, and I'm going to flip out and do my dream business, or I'm going to do this new thing. And so oftentimes they don't have all the tools and all the information they need throughout that process.
Mm-hmm. And those, I might be wrong on this, but those sole proprietors should be doing a Schedule C, if not.
Absolutely. Yeah. They should be filing a Schedule C with their tax return. However, throughout the year, as they're doing that business, they should be making estimated tax payments towards the income they're making there. And oftentimes, if they also have a W-2 employment, they think that, well, my taxes have been withheld all year. How did I get here? Because this other money. And another area where one of the biggest cases that I've seen, two of the biggest cases that I've seen recently, W-2Gs, people going to the casinos and winning big chunks of money and getting that reported, and they are not tracking their losses to offset that money. Mm-hmm. And with gamblers, a lot of times they play that money right back, but they have not tracked it. And so the IRS says, no, you're gonna pay taxes on what's been reported unless you can substantiate those losses.
Yeah. And you probably haven't seen, and maybe it's down the road a little bit, so you might not have seen problems from this, but all the cryptocurrency trading and the gains that people are, I know my son got a lot of 1099s because, he was playing around with that. So I'm sure he had no thought that there was a tax implication there, but.
Absolutely, there is a tax implication there. And the thing about it is, with that cryptocurrency, if those transactions are all happening within 1 year, which is mostly what's happening from a trading standpoint, that's going to be taxed as ordinary income and not capital gains. Those are big numbers. I actually did have someone come in for planning, and we were putting together a strategy to help him with cryptocurrency. And he had set aside his $40,000 to pay in on his taxes because he did not pay it throughout the year. And comes to find out, when we go through to compute it, it was a 6-figure balance due. Just simply because of that difference in understanding of, with crypto, it's a little bit different than stocks that you might hold for multiple years. Now, if you are a hodler and you hold your crypto, then you're safe from that. Yeah. But crypto traders are definitely at least the novice ones are somewhat in for a shock if they don't. But the good thing is there are professionals out there that can help, and there's a ton of valuable information on YouTube. Now, I wouldn't go out there and then go. I still would consult a professional, but in between, just to get a better understanding of the position you may be in, doesn't hurt to do some at-home research.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So interesting. I'm sure you have amazing stories. I'm going to ask you for a couple more in a minute, but what is some other just general advice that you would give people to protect themselves, to deal with, problems if they're already in that situation? I do think it's interesting. One thing that you said is you might have a year where you don't file. I could see where that just kind of like, you did it 1 year, you didn't file, you didn't hear from anybody, and it's kind of easy to just let that be like something that you do in the next year, and all of a sudden, you've really built kind of a snowball effect of problems.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, Michelle, and you're 100% right. If you don't file, it's just going to be silence. Mm-hmm. Unlike if you do file a balance, it's going to be notice. So totally different. And so there is this, probably bad assumption that you're safe, that nothing's going on and everything's quiet in the background. Well, a little bit of that is because there's no statute running on that. So they don't have to hurry and come get it, So at some point they're going to come, and we're typically, we only need to go back 6 years and get you caught up, but they will show up. And then in cases where there are, their wage and income items reported, so W-2s, 1099s, and so forth reported to the IRS, then they will file for you. And guess what happens? There's no offsets, no deductions with regard to your business expenses. So that gets to be a really big ouch. And I have to share, this is another big one. Right now, the IRS, I looked before we got on here because the last time I checked, the IRS was 7.2 million returns behind on processing, right? So now we're just out of this tax season and they're 9.8 million returns behind, okay, that are unprocessed. The IRS doesn't even know they exist. And so they're in a truck somewhere. So I shouldn't say that, but I'm going to say it. So because I do really have conversations with real agents on the phone. And one said, there are trucks and trucks and trucks of mail of returns that are not to be processed. But here's the thing about that. Those returns have been mailed in by taxpayers who are trying to do due diligence. I will say the number probably has gone up because there were PPP loans, there were EIDL loans, there were these loan opportunities, there were the stimulus payments. So that incented some people who might not have otherwise decided to get their tax returns all filed and caught up. So now you have all these additional returns and the IRS, obviously couldn't handle them and they're trying to get it caught up. But the sad thing about it, the impact of that is people who elderly people who don't e-file, they mail their returns in. And I have a client like that, mail their returns in and they do all that. Then they get levied or they get liens and there's nothing you can do because the returns look like they're not there. And that has been a big frustration point for our office because historically, when that happens, we could simply get on the phone, fax a copy of the return signed, they accept it, and we move forward. Because of the number of delinquent returns that have not been processed and hadn't even been checked in as received, they won't allow us to fax it in. Wow. So there's just this big roller coaster roaring in the background with this. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this is all going to play out. Recently, there was a press release that the IRS said they were not, because of that huge number, they were slowing down on the collection letters and the non-filing letters, the non-filing letters, because they know some of those returns are there. But that doesn't give the taxpayers much peace of mind, as you can imagine, when they're trying to get on track.
Well, and my question for you is, so if there are problems, when is the interest starting to, when does the interest start? I mean, what's happening there? Because if it's sitting on a truck and there are problems with it or something, are you in trouble from April 18th or whatever it was this year? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So what happens is the date on the return is the date that the return will be considered received. Okay. So that from that point, the return will be considered received. However, there is still interest on any balance due that's being accrued during this period. And so I think I either said or alluded to this a minute ago. I expect the next couple of years, as far as the people that we're helping, are going to be people that are impacted by that. Because that's going to be the next issue.
So interesting. It's a whole giant conversation. I didn't realize there was no statute of limitations on this. I thought, so it sounds like if they get to it 10 years from now, they can still, is that what you're saying or no?
You mean processing the return 10 years from now?
Well, or I guess coming back to you about an issue.
Right. So if there's an issue or a balance that is determined, whenever that is determined, the IRS has 10 years from the date of assessment to collect on that balance. So it's taking them a very long time. I don't think they're going to push that. I wouldn't count on that statute running out while you're waiting for them to post a return.
Yeah. Okay.
And another really quick, Michelle, you did ask a second ago, of what advice do I give taxpayers? And one of the simplest things that I recommend is open the letter. Because not only when you realize you're in trouble or you haven't filed, and again, I'll give another story, but there are often times where things happen. I had someone who fell out of a helicopter.
Oh my God.
And so she was, so all of these things where she was unable to even know she existed for 6 months, and then she's having to rehab. So things happen, but here's the thing. Open the letters, or have someone that you know, love, and trust open those letters and let you know what's going on. And if you are not in a position where you can afford to hire someone, there is the Taxpayer Advocate Service who will help you in most situations. Now, they won't do a settlement per se, but they will help you get an uncollectible. They will advise that you look like you qualify for a settlement. I suggest you go find someone to help you with that. They will say that. And they will help you with an installment agreement if you're able to pay anything at all. And that might be a very minimal amount, but it's enough to give you peace of mind about your bank account and about your wages or your disability payments or your Social Security payments or your business accounts in the case of a business. And so, that is an avenue that's available for everyone. There's only so far that they're going to go, but that is a resource. So I do want to mention that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great for people to know. Gosh, there really is a lot. And I have to commend you again for, the kind of calm energy around it and just sort of matter of fact, there are ways to deal with this, and it's important. It's so good because there's so much emotion around this stuff. There's emotion around money anyway, but taxes particularly kind of get people. And I love what you're saying about the mail. I have my own story because, of course, whenever you see a letter from the IRS or whatever, your stomach does a little flip.
Unless you're expecting a refund.
That's true.
That's not us. Most of the time.
But those don't come in letters anymore very often either. But but for the longest time, I was getting these regular letters. And every time I'd be like, oh, no. And I'd open it. First, I didn't used to open it so quickly. But then I started opening them. That's a thing I forced myself to do over the years, just whatever it is, the American Express bill, whatever, to force myself not to leave it, but to open it. But it was the same letter every time. I got so many of them, and it was some ridiculous thing about, your mailing address has changed, and, it was nothing. And so I always had the fear, and it was always nothing. And I'm not saying that it's always nothing, but for me, those letters, so, it was one of those, again, the things we worry about that don't come to pass. But so they're not always scary, and you're right, you should just open them.
Open it, and there's something to deal with it. And another thing that affects taxpayers now, and this, I believe it kicked in 2015, don't quote me, but in recent years, I guess that's not even recent anymore. 3 years got snapped out from under us, right? No. But the IRS now will halt your passport, right? So that is something that they will do. So if you do not have a passport and you haven't handled your issues with the IRS, your tax issues, and got some type of reasonable, either installment agreement, settlement or whatever, or started paying them, then they will put a flag on that passport. And if you go to leave town, to fly away on your vacation, I had a doctor call me from the airport. I need you. They blocked my passport.
Wow.
Really? Well, what happened? Because, and so it does happen. And then, of course, I jump in there and we get them negotiated, and then we get that off of there. But that's a big deal. So that's one of those letters that may come, and it doesn't have a balance anywhere on it, but it's notifying you, hey, your passport you have been reported to the Department of State, and your passport is inactive. And so if you're, going to get one, it'll be declined. If you have one, it'll be revoked. If you're out of the country and you're ready to come home, you can't, because the passport is invalid. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a big deal as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And will the IRS call you by phone? Because I've always told everyone they will not. You will get something in the mail. And then when I was reading to find that statistic I read earlier, it said they may contact you by mail or phone. And I thought, oh, wow. Okay.
Normally, the IRS does not contact you by phone, but when there is a revenue officer or revenue agent, live person in the field assigned, they will. Okay. And they will also come to your door, and they will come to your office, and they will leave, this big card that says IRS on your front door. I mean, this is, I would say over the years, I've been doing this 27 years, say. And so it's very seasonal. And I would say every 7 to 8 years, the IRS kind of goes into this place where they're super aggressive. And out of all of those cycles that I've seen, this last year has been worse than any other one. And I don't, the agents, the officers, the people we're dealing with have been more aggressive across the board. There are still really nice ones, and those are the ones who know their stuff. So I think, there was this big hiring protocol that they did a couple years back. And I think some of the people who aren't as trained are a little bit more aggressive because, for whatever reason, I don't know why. They're going to make that story up. Yeah. But it's important to check that because it could be a passport, and then it could be nothing. It could just be an identity verification so that your return can be processed. That's another thing. That's simple. There's a phone number. You call, you answer your date of birth, your social security, your AGI, whatever, identity verified, your return is processed. Simple things like that get ignored because taxpayers are afraid to open the mail.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I'm sure we could do another whole show just with stories. I would actually love to hear. You must have fascinating stories. As soon as you said I worked with somebody who fell out of a helicopter, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I know that you've seen a lot and help people a lot. And I just want to. I want people to know how to connect with you. You said you're working remotely, so I guess it doesn't matter if you're in your local area to be able to work with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are able to provide service nationwide. We are remote, and so you can reach us at kedraflowers.com or confidentialtaxrelief.com, either one. And we are here, and we have a secure 24/7 portal. And so you simply upload your documents, and we talk to you just like I'm talking to you right now, Michelle.
And your website, is it on? Yeah. Okay.
It is on there.
Flowers.
Yes, it is.
That's fantastic that you have that much access for people because, that's exactly what you should do. If you're in crisis, you go talk to a therapist. If you're in tax crisis, I would say you go and talk to Kedra. And just from hearing her talk, hopefully you have an understanding that you're going to feel better after talking to her. You definitely... I think are a calming influence and presence in this kind of thing that people need. You need that as much as you need the information just to help you not be in stress mode.
Absolutely.
So thank you for the work you do. It's fantastic. And you also help. This is the last thing I want to say is this isn't everybody's specialty. Just because you have a CPA or a tax preparer, that doesn't mean they know how to do what Kedra does. And so, it's a different specialty altogether.
Absolutely. And the majority of our referrals are from other CPAs, from our colleagues, because they don't want to deal with the IRS either, right? They want to do the returns correctly. They want to show you how to do it and tell you what to pay, and you do it and everything works out. And when it doesn't, oftentimes they will refer to me. One other big issue though, Michelle, since this is about money and you, that I do want to mention that's happening, and this has been since 2018 when we got the TCJA Tax Act in place, right? That act allowed taxpayers to keep more of their money throughout the year in their pocket, which reduced withholding requirement, right, of employers. And so for most people that works out great. But for people like traveling nurses or people who have multiple jobs, I'm seeing more and more of them who are accumulating balances year over year. And they're like, well, my employer's not withholding enough. And they're still not understanding it's your responsibility. And they are married and they're claiming on their W-4 married and zero. Why isn't enough being withheld? Well, for one, you got two different streams of income coming, or it could be one person with multiple jobs. Mm-hmm. And that will mess with that computation of withholding. And usually you're going to end up under withheld. So I recommend to people in that position to always claim single and zero, and then have your tax preparer check your withholding somewhere around mid-year so you can adjust and add additional withholding. And I've told more people in the last year that they need to add additional withholding above single and zero than I ever have in the past. And that's just because of the job movement and the different things coming in the door.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Happened to my son. I couldn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on, and I expected him to get a huge refund. He was under withheld. So, and I didn't realize that was so much of a thing. So thank you. That's huge. Again, know what's going on with your money and your numbers and your taxes, including your withholding. People don't want to take the time to do that. Very important. You will be happy when you get that refund because you were not under withheld. So Kedra, thank you so much. I loved having you here today. I think everybody had to have gotten a lot out of this show. And please, audience, connect with Kedra Flowers. If you need help in this regard, don't wait. Don't let the problem get worse if there is a problem, or get to know her to optimize your taxes. And thank you so much. This was great information, and I love what you do, and I appreciate you being here on the Money and You Show today. And audience, thank you for being here. We love having you here as well. And so please subscribe. We'd love reviews. We'd love to hear questions. If you have a question, you can pass it on to me, and I can pass it on to Kedra for that matter, and we can get an answer for you. So thank you for joining us. You can find us every Monday at 7 at the ubngo.com website, and also all the podcast platforms, and Limit Free Life YouTube channel and Facebook page. And join us again next week. Thank you.